Some of you may have noticed that the way I make eye contact is not by scanning the room, which is what a lot of speakers, when they start to try to make eye contact, do. But what this ends up doing is telling me that you're not really looking at anyone. What I actually do is I stop and I look directly at Arthur as if I'm only talking to Arthur. And then I move up to Angela. And then I move up to Tamira. And then I go back and I see Hannah. Why do I do that?
To include everybody?
Yeah, because if I'm looking directly at you, it's as if I'm having a conversation with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you, and then you, and then you. But if I scan and I try to make contact with everybody, you really feel like I'm just glossing over you. I'm not really talking to Sean. Does that make sense? So that's what you want to aim for. That is a skill that's often learned in public speaking. So my point to you is excellent is 90% making direct eye contact with me. But that doesn't mean that you can't do good with less than that. Facial expressions. This is one of my favorite things when public speaking class first starts, because people get nervous and they get up here and they want to talk about like the happiest moment in their life. And instead of talking about the happiest moment in their life, they talk about the happiest moment in their life as if it is the most dull thing they've ever done. So the happiest moment in my life was when I learned to surf with my dad. And it was really cool because we were out on the ocean and he pushed the surfboard and I popped up and I got to ride that wave. And does anybody feel excited?
Great.
No! You don't feel excited and happy. You're like, what is wrong with her? She has no emotion. But the same thing can happen when you talk about a very somber event. One of my favorite examples of this was several years ago. There was a man that was killed in Virginia Beach by a bus. He was hit by a bus in Virginia Beach. And one of the news crews went to interview the pastor of his church. And the pastor of his church, during the interview, said, "It's really sad when we lose someone like this. He was the father of 2, and we're praying for his wife and children, and we just hope that they're going to be okay." And I thought, dude, you are creepy or you're into the wife. I don't know which one it is. But
he killed him.
Because why is he so happy this guy is dead but talking about how we're going to mourn him? Like, because your face does not show that. As human beings, we want your face to match your feelings. And if it doesn't, we don't believe your feelings. As a matter of fact, communication experts tell us that almost 93% of your communication has nothing to do with the words that you say, but with your nonverbals, including rate, tone, facial expressions, body movements. So when you tell me you're really happy to go surfing with your dad and it's so much fun, I really think that your dad's out there beating you in the ocean or something, because it doesn't look like you're happy. But when you tell me you're really sad this guy died, I'm thinking, no, you're not. What is wrong with you? So I do want to show you really quickly a little clip. Again, maybe.
There is only one person who was in the house the night JonBenet Ramsey was murdered that we have never heard from, her brother Burke. Dr. Phil scored the exclusive interview with a now grown-up Burke Ramsey.
The first thing I remember is my mom bursting in my room, really frantic, saying like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh," running around my room looking for JonBenet.
Burke Ramsey was only 9 years old when his sister JonBenet was murdered nearly 20 years ago. And in all the years since, he's never spoken about it in public until now.
And the next thing I remember is a police officer coming to my room and shining a flashlight.
How in the world did you convince Burke, JonBenet's brother, to do this interview?
Well, you know, it's the 20-year anniversary. His thinking was, if that's going to happen, I want to control the narrative.
We'd go to the supermarket sometimes and there'd be a tabloid, JonBenet's picture plastered on the front. It just made me a very private person.
Long considered suspects, but ultimately cleared in the murder were Burke's dad, John, and his now deceased mother, Patsy.
I love that child.
Even Burke was once a suspect.
I've heard rumors where we were hiding Burke because he was this crazy kid.
There are times when he's talking about very heavy, dark content, and yet he's smiling. Did you go to John Bonet's funeral?
Yeah, I remember the viewing. I remember the casket was small and her eyes were closed.
Did he ever understand that people on the outside were looking at him and saying, "You are a suspect"?
As he got older, he became aware that he was a suspect. I asked him straight up, did you murder John Bonet, your sister?
Oh, you knew Dr. Phil was not going to mince words.
How do we feel?
He killed her.
Guilty?
Oh, he killed her, honey. He killed her and cooked her and everything.
I can't think a 9-year-old killed his sister.
It happens all the time.
What a lot of us don't know, and what the whole Dr. Phil sensationalism does not portray, is that the young man actually had a lot of social disorders. Part of that was based on the fact that he was 9 when his 6-year-old sister died. Part of it was based on the fact the way his parents decided to shelter him. And part of it was that he had some genetic disorders anyway. But Dr. Phil doesn't ever talk about that. The other part of it is there are people that when they get nervous, just smile. I happen to know that I'm one of those people, so it's very rare that I talk about really somber subjects, especially like on the first day of class when I'm the most nervous. I'm not going to talk about something really sad because I know like I'm going to laugh through it and you're all going to leave going, oh my God, there's something wrong with that chick. So instead, I try to talk about things that match my personality. And with him, he's been asked to talk about his sister's death, and he doesn't really have a choice. You may or may not have noticed that the whole time he was talking, he was also doing this, which is another sign of nervousness. Mm-hmm. But most of us don't ever go past the fact that he's smiling while he's talking about viewing his sister's dead body. And that's creepy. So your facial expressions matter. Your audience is making determinations based on your facial expressions. We also make determinations based on your posture. Most of us do not have really good posture, and at this point in the lecture, I look around the room and see how many of you have really bad posture. Here's the truth. Good posture means that you're using these core muscles in your stomach to hold you up and not your back. It also means that you're not slouching down or leaning over. And at this point in the semester, most students are more like this. Why? Because
we're
all
over
really
it.
Stressed out and feeling overwhelmed, and you're like, and what you really have to do to have good posture is you stand up straight, you feel like there's a cord pulling from the top of your head to the ceiling, you put your shoulders back, you hold yourself up using these muscles, not sitting in that spine in the back, which means your hips are slightly tilted forward and these muscles are tight. And if you don't do it every day, you will feel it. There are two things that good posture does. One, it frees up your diaphragm to actually move up and down, which is what actually allows you to project your voice very well. Because your breathing should actually come from your diaphragm and not from up here, which is where most of us breathe when we're sitting like this. There is a huge difference between how confident I think you are if you walk in like this and if you walk in like that. And that can change my interpretation of your speech. And the truth is, it changes everybody's interpretation, not just mine. So even if you don't feel confident, put your shoulders back, feel like you're getting a little string pulling you from the tip of your head up, and stand up straight and tighten these ab muscles, because that's going to make you look like you know what you're doing. Movement. You should only move when there's a purpose for it. So move between points, don't move during them. With movement, one of the things lots of people like to do is instead of moving when they're transitioning to a new point, they like to stand in one place, and a lot of us like to sit in this hip, but then what happens is you begin to do this, and then the longer your speech goes on, you do more of this, and your speech isn't about a dance or a dance class, so doing this gets really distracting. The other thing many of you will like to do is you will like to pace just back and forth so that you're talking to the whole audience and you're really trying hard to do that eye contact thing. So you're just going to walk back and forth the whole time, which is great, except that you look like a caged tiger, and that doesn't make your audience feel really good. So instead, you want to stand in one spot and make your point, and then after you make your point, you can move to the next spot to get to the next point. Did you notice that? The next point? Oh, that's called a gesture. Gestures make your speech seem prepared. Some of us have normal gestures that we do. Many of you are very worried about what to do with your hands, so you'll end up doing things like this. Put your hands behind your back, or on your hip, or in front of you, and you'll lock them together so that you don't move them. And the truth is this, and sticking your hands in your pockets, and putting them on your hips are way more awkward than just letting them gesture naturally. Let your hands move naturally. And then if you really want to look like a polished speaker, you add a few purposeful gestures. Gestures that you've thought about and used during your speech, practices, to make it look like you know what you're doing. So when I talked about posture, I did my whole body down and then your body up, right? These are planned and purposeful to go along with the speech that I'm talking about. Does that make sense? 2 or 3 in a 5 to 7 minute speech, and you're going to look like you know what you're doing. Notes. So many of you will want to have notes while you're speaking, and notes are a great thing to have, because remember that memorization takes too long, and quite frankly, you might forget. You can have your notes in any form that you want. Some of you will choose to just print them out on paper. The only thing with just printing them out on paper is this. You tend to do a lot of this. The other thing that I really don't like about paper, and I very rarely hold paper on the first day of class, is that I'm usually shaking, and if I'm shaking any at all, the paper makes it look like I'm shaking a whole lot because you're watching the paper move. Note cards are less likely to move like that, which make them a little bit better to use for public speaking if you're going to carry it around with you. You may have noticed that I tend to leave paper there or use the PowerPoint as my notes because it tells me what's coming up next. Make sense? The very last thing I want to talk about with nonverbals is the lectern. In public speaking class, if you ever have me, I know some of you have talked about the fact that you might, we avoid the lectern because it creates a barrier between you and your audience. But Ms. Long didn't say anything about that, and it's nowhere on your grade sheet, so you are more than welcome to use the lectern. Here's the problem with the lectern. Most of you will come up here and stand behind the lectern and then hold on to it as if it is going to save you from something, or you're going to use it as this great big shield. But it doesn't really work that way. And if I'm leaning and holding on the lectern, I really kind of look like I'm either really too casual, or if you notice how tight my grip is, you're going, oh my God, she's really nervous. Whereas if I would just let go and stand up, you wouldn't notice those things. And quite frankly, that gets really tiring. So the lectern is not your safety net. You will actually do better if you can come away from the lectern and speak directly to your audience. You'll be able to make a better connection with them. But that is nowhere on your grade sheet. So if you would like the lectern and you would like to stand behind it, I'm okay with that. Just let go of it. Don't get a death grip on it. That is the elements that I'd like to talk about with nonverbal. And I'm going to give you one last piece of information before we turn this over to my students who want to go ahead and give their speeches. And that is this. The universal message outline is really important. You probably learned about it in English class as your 5-paragraph essay. It's really the universal message outline. You use it for any message, whether it's a 5-paragraph essay or a 20-page paper. But your English teachers like to call it the 5-paragraph essay format. I don't know. But it is the universal message outline. And basically what it says is every message has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. In your introduction in a 5-paragraph essay, what do you have?
The introduction.
The introduction, but what's in an introduction?
Thesis statement.
Your thesis statement's in there. What do you say before your thesis statement? What's going to be included? That comes after your thesis statement. It's the first thing you're expected to do in a paper.
Catch the audience?
The attention grabber, catch your audience. So your introduction in any message, whether it's a speech or a 5-paragraph essay or a 20-page paper, is going to be get the audience's attention, give me your thesis statement, tell me what's in your speech or your paper. Those are elements under content, or I'm sorry, under organization on your grade sheet. They're actually 6 through 8. And then you're going to transition to your body. You're going to have your 3 body points. You may have more than that in a 20-page paper. You may have 4 or 5 in a 20-page paper. And then you will have a conclusion. What do you have in your conclusion?
Your conclusion.
Right, but what do you do? What are the 3 elements?
You sum it up.
Sum it up, give everything that you already said,